the 6th day of, the very 6th day of 2022. 2022. I hope everybody's doing marginally good on this Wednesday, unless you're pro-nuclear. And you need to stick around anyway, and we'll get you up to speed on what's what on the nuclear cycle, the death cult, also known as the International Atomic Energy Agency. It's absurd to call that lot the International Atomic Energy Agency. They have sovereignty over every country worldwide. So the EU, of course, got hammered by Fukushima. This is France's model of Fukushima radioactive plume. And that's the EU. Look at the EU getting pounded. But they're convinced that nuclear does no harm. So what are you going to do? I didn't actually know they were going to make a decision yesterday. That's kind of disappointing. Oh yeah, so what was the total? Last night we got 1 hour, 33 minutes, 19 seconds. And now it's 1 hour, 33 and 26 seconds. So yesterday's video, 12 hours later, changed time. Every day, 12 hours, specifically exactly after the show ends. My videos get 6 or 7 seconds longer. We're going to showcase that now at the beginning of each show to see how they're probably putting software in my video to track people, I would imagine, because lobbyists have taken over for a long time ago, but now they're gone crazy. Radiation near Tokyo spiked 100 million times normal after Fukushima. Intensive contamination hit Tokyo. It was hidden from the public. The whole northern hemisphere is at risk of radioactive fallout. We don't have to totally panic. There's a possibility we can luck our way out of it. Let me take you back to that Francis model. I'll speed it up. How can you luck your way out of that model that covers the whole planet in 16 days? A lot of people think it's just going into the ocean, right? It's not. U.S. West Coast born a significant brunt of the hot particles from Fukushima, with a study claiming. So the Parliament vote to give green labels to nuclear is that nuclear does no harm. It does less harm than other sources of energy. Here's another plume from Fukushima from a different institution. I think this one's the Norwegian Institute of Air Research, but hang on. I'm sorry. Why do I struggle with this shit so much? That'll probably work a bit better. So that's the Xenon 133 plume model. And the model's only based on venting, not actual emissions. Which is that this is like, so carbon from coal, gas, or oil doesn't create plumes that covers the planet, and gas, oil, and coal emissions their plumes are 50 or 100 miles at best. So if you don't put them in your city, you won't have an issue with them. But radiation, because it's so tiny and so powerful, each atom is a engine. It pulses energy in every direction at almost the speed of light. So coal, oil, and gas emissions don't have those attributes. There's only one thing that can cause an actual physical global warming. It's radiation followed from just decades of dumping, but also from all the current fuel pools are all still splitting the atom and releasing that all day into your environment. Such a sneaky industry. Nuclear power plants would be allowed to be marketed as sustainable investments or financial markets, on financial markets. So they created the EU Taxonomy, right? It was supposed to be an act of good fate that they would, renewables would now get some precedence. Instead, they went the most carbon intensive thing on the planet in human history is nuclear. EU lawmakers now, it's a stretch to call the people lawmakers, but that's what they're described at. Obviously, they're not genuine, or nuclear couldn't have made it. They'll get a green label if they pledge to switch to so-called accident-tolerant fuels in 2025. First off, this so-called accident-tolerant fuels is designed to give you an extra 10 to 25 minutes before it melts down. There's no such thing as a fuel that doesn't melt down. And details for final storage of radioactive waste in 2050. So all you had to do was say, yeah, well, like you did now for 80 years. Oh, yeah, no, we're going to come up with a solution. And who's going to be around with any energy in 28 years to find out? So-called accident-tolerant fuel was actually basically was supposed to give you 5 or 10 more minutes before it melted down. And so claiming they're going to, right, that's meant to pacify the people. 328 crazies support the proposed investment label. 278 said no, and 33 were absent. So all things said, that's a close vote, and it should never be a close vote. It should be almost 100% no. Right? So this is lobbyists. This is not actual people that are in any sensitive form honest. They have no... There should never be this kind of discrepancy. So anybody that talks about, including themselves, of course, talking about the environment, you're an environmental campaigners or left-leaning. So if you're right, then it's okay to be a savage and lie and deceit and dishonesty. And if you're left-leaning, you got to be a bit more. Criticize the proposal labeled gas and nuclear. Gas is way 10 times better than nuclear, 1,000 times better than nuclear, 1 billion times for a transition is fine. The emissions that are heating up the planet are from, and you'll see if you hang around, I'll give you a good demonstration of it. Basically, the emissions from endless nuclear dumping, we'll cover that hopefully. Well, not all of it, because it would have to do 120 shows to cover the dumping that the industry has done in 80 years. So gas, oil, and coal emissions don't create plumes that covers the planet in 20 days, and they don't pulse energy like radiation does for millions of years at the speed of light, heating up everything, killing the bacteria, the fungus in your forest, so the foliage doesn't break down like it should. And so when you finally have a forest fire come through there, it's exceptionally large amounts being thrown up in the air at 3,000 degree temperatures, right? Because it didn't break down the way it normally would which is perpetual setting fires everywhere. He said, I voted against the objection because the fears expressed about this delegated act aren't justified. But I'll show you they're justified. There's many ways to do that. And we'll cover about 150 of them. MEP Marie Toussaint, who campaigned hard to defeat the file, blasted the outcomes of an odious greenwashing attempt with Francis Macron as conductor. And we see this constantly where France is the deceiver and a failure for Europe and the climate. So, Sizewell C. What is it? Where is it planned? Well, as you can see, it's surrounded by farms. It's the strangest thing imaginable. And where is it planned? It's not just farms, though. I got a whole bunch of studies to help articulate the issue, even though it's too late for the EU. Hopefully, we can head off any other country. And where is it planned to be? But on top of that, you know, they don't have the workforce to just go nutty and build all kinds of nuclear on top of that. They don't have the precious metals on top of that. China mostly controls the metals. And China has got big plans of their own for weapons, so they need them. It's really something, though, to have nuclear power plants. This is a future nuclear power plant, Sizewell C. It's going to be surrounded by farms. And they're showing you that, right, to confuse the daylights of the average person. Oh, it must be okay, it's got farms. A decision on whether to grant government planning approval for a nuclear reactor as Suffolk's is expected the week. What are the reasons behind Sizewell C arguments for and against it? The one argument they don't use, if work goes ahead, it's expected to take 9 years to build it. Cost about $20 billion plus whatever. Well, if it's going to take 9 years to build it, then it's 14 years down the road. If it's going to be 20 billion, it's certainly going to be 30 something. That's how it is in the nuclear industry. Look it up yourself. In January, the government and all the precious metal, all the precious resources, everything has to be triple checked for quality. It's the most carbon intensive thing in human history on top of that. In January, the UK government pledged a measly 100 million to support Sizewell C. Where would it be built? It would be built in estuary and farmlands and protected areas. It's hemmed in with every kind of protected area. And just beyond the plant is a special protected area, SPA, which provides, this is like marshland, wet grasslands, reed beds, habitat for a variety of wildlife, marsh harriers, otters, water voles, bearded tits, which is a small bird, lies just north of the site. Oh yeah, in farmland. Prime Minister Johnson, whatever the hell that creature is, says expanding the use of nuclear would help cut bills and resist bullying from Russia. So Russia's invasion of Ukraine was used by almost all NATO countries and United Nations countries to promote nuclear at the same time and sustained. Quite interesting, isn't it? Sizewell C is a key part of the new UK energy strategy to build 8 new nuclear power plants. It's hoping that by 2050 to have 24 gigawatts, 25% of the country's electricity. The plan was to build a nuclear reactor every year rather than once every decade. Like, if you think about all the trouble he had trying to get Sizewell and I got a brain for here right now. It's Sizewell and... Because I usually got it right at my fingertips to show you instead of saying it. Hang on. Have I really screwed up that bad that I can't find it? Yeah, apparently so, Dana. So Hinkley Point C and Sizewell Nuke plants, both of them surrounded by farms and estuaries and everything else. Okay, and we got a poll. Is the dirty disease factories, nuclear power plants, also known as atomic plague, a green energy? And 18% said yeah. Well, like, come on. You can't call it green energy, my goodness. Like, it's absurd to call it green energy. Like, if you're going to be a bootlicker, please go somewhere else, bootlickers. It's absurd to suggest it. The Secretary of State has until July the 8th to make a decision on whether to approve the application which would provide consent to build Sizewell C. And what is the local reaction? This is Allison from Stop Sizewell C, who normally would be just what it is today. One of those days where everything is, because you're trying to tell a difficult story, right? Oh, there it is. Instead of being at the top, I had it at the bottom of the pile. That's her there, actually, right? StopSizewellC.org. Yeah, because it's surrounded by farmland. It's evil. It's hemorrhaging. All their sites have hemorrhaged radiation into the environment and the country to the point of where it's absurd to build any more of these dinosaurs. They say Sizewell is the most environmentally sensitive of possible nuclear sites on top of that. And is in major, surrounded by farmland as far as you can see. The anti-nuclear power campaigners argued Sizewell C will be too slow and expensive, which is true 100%, to, like, it's not decarbonization, it's radioactive fallout, capture the isotopes in the environment, is of 80 years of emissions, pulsing energy every second. Carbon simply can't cause global warming, right? Radiation can't. Carbon doesn't pulse energy every second. Carbon don't make plumes that covers the entire biosphere. Radiation does. Radiation meets every facet of the qualifications for global warming. Carbon meets none of them. Carbon, you need carbon for plants and insects and 8 million species and humanity to survive. Trees, can't survive without carbon. No life form can survive actually without carbon. It's up to $42 billion and up to 17 years. Is pretty accurate. When you, on the top of that, you don't have the knowledge anymore, right? Russia's barely. We've seen this for the last 4 years, basically, all this posturing. And the next prime minister will cancel everything. EDF can't build any of the reactors they're trying to build as it is. They have appalling track record. It's already expected to be 30% over budget, up to $26 billion, and behind schedule, and it's not even started. And campaigners are highlighting technology failures at other power stations, like the Taxonomy plant in China. We covered it. And they also dismissed claims nuclear power was homegrown because the designs, developers, and operators are all foreigners, which is 100% true. Korean Energy Northwest signs a memorandum of understandings for MOX fuel, used nuclear fuel recycling industry partners, which is MOX fuel they're talking about. Assessments of routine atmospheric discharges from Sellafield, which has a community there called Columbia, where they have massive cancer clusters. And for the children, they were trying to blame it on the common flu. Actual academic studies to downplay it. It's surrounded by farms. There's 8 million liters a day going into the Atlantic Ocean from a meltdown in 1957. Nuclear accident model has been used to assess the impact of routine atmospheric radioactive discharges from Sellafield. Controls and anthropogenic radionuclide distributions in Sellafield impacted eastern the Irish Sea. There is no controls on the distribution. You can't control the air currents or the ocean. Discharge low-level waste from Sellafield compared to actual fuel rods, but there's nothing low about the level if you consume it. For 50 years, 137 cesium, they just call it plutonium because all plutoniums, 238, 239, 240, 241 are there. 241 americium, which decays to 241 plutonium, which is the nastiest plutonium. 239, I'm sorry. In the Irish Sea. In the Irish Sea. Using a chain of models to predict the health environmental impacts in Norway. Now, the bottom paragraph is people that participated in the study. From a hypothetical nuclear accident at Sellafield. Well, they actually had a real accident in 1957. What's called instead of calling it a nuclear meltdown, they call it the wind scale fires. It's like calling it the Chernobyl fires instead of Chernobyl meltdown. Britain's Chernobyl was covered up for decades. 1957. So, from the hypothetical accident, because they can't use the real accident, right? They can't use what happened to say, because you won't get funding, right? So they can't use the actual accident to say, this is what happened to Norway after Sellafield. And it's not just Norway, obviously. Sellafield circled the entire planet for decades, the radioactive fallout. From hypothetical nuclear accident, which was that was a mixed oxide, a MOX fuel. So remember, we're talking about this company, Korean Energy Northwest signs memorandum of understanding on used nuclear fuel recycling. So when you recycle used fuel that's already gone through a chain reaction, it's 1 billion times more toxic. So when you put the fuel rods in and start a chain reaction, the emissions, because it's splitting the atoms, those atoms are considered billion times more toxic than industrial poison. If you harvest these emitters, they're still splitting the atom, these fuel rods. That's the problem, ultimately. They're perpetual machines. They're constantly making more atoms. And if you do it right, you can make enough atoms to fuel reactors constantly from just a single source. It's magic and it's evil because it's not a good magic, right? Continuing contamination of the North Atlantic and Arctic waters by cellophile radionuclides. Continuing contamination, 60 plus years. Continuing contamination, North Atlantic, Arctic waters. So you don't want to introduce this system because it has these attributes I'm showing you. Unraveling 5 decades of anthropogenic 236 uranium discharge from nuclear reprocessing plants. That's a 2020 study. Previously unknown large releases into the Irish Sea. Well, they were dumping it into the Irish Sea constantly in the 70s. And from ships, going out and just dropping it off in prime fishing grounds. All nuclear does is harm. It can't exist without endless harm to the entire food chain and every species. Assessment and prospective food chain doses from radioactive discharges. Assessment and prospective food chain doses from radioactive discharges from the reprocessed British Nuclear Fuel Limited Sellafield. That's who's running or owns it, I guess. Man-made anthropogenic 129 iodine concentrations. After Fukushima, Ottawa's study out of Canada showed 220 million atoms of just the iodine 129 they are acknowledging per liter of rainfall sustained on the northern hemisphere. So all species iodines, thyroid glands were saturated with absurd numbers, and this is converted into radioactive hormones. Anthropogenic concentrations of iodine 129, 127 ratio in rainwater in Spain from 2005 2008 as affected by airborne releases from Sellafield, which is the reprocessing facility, and La Hague, which is France's. An interesting fact about La Hague is it has, give you an idea how big this place is. All it does is reprocessing of all the fuel for the reactors. Has 500 security guards. Over 500 security guards for France's La Hague. Iodine 129, 127 European seawaters and precipitation from northern Germany, because it's coming from all these different countries, right? Discharges from the European processing plants La Hague and Sellafield. The study of the atmospheric 85 krypton concentrations growth, like Superman's krypton, between 1979 and 1999. Growth over the past decade is get more each year. The results were compared with those values found in the literature and with calculations of krypton emissions from the reprocessing plant of Cape La Hague, which is France's. 137 cesium, 135 cesium, isotopic composition, environmental samples across Europe, environmental transport from all kinds of different facilities worldwide, constantly hemorrhaging it. All the fuel pools, over 1,000 fuel pools worldwide is hemorrhaging this stuff also into our environment. All working nuclear power plants are allowed to emit so much radiation up those skinny stacks. The transfer of radionuclides from sea to land via the air. It's liberated back into the environment the same way salt is. And lots of studies on insects 200 miles inland from the ocean are acclimated to more salt in their diet because of the liberation of salt from the ocean, the crashing of the ocean, the convection, the evaporation. 237 Neptunian, 129 iodines. Atom ratio in the Arctic Ocean has 237 Neptunian from Western European Russian fuel, which is the Mayak. They have another one, right? Which is the La Hague, is the Western Europe. Russia would be Mayak. Reprocessing facilities entered the Arctic Ocean. Yeah, of course it has. Discharges from the European nuclear fuel reprocessing facility. So what I'm showing you now is this is the preamble to, right, to make you, in order for you to appreciate what I'm going to show you, I need to show you this to make sure you're on the right page. Sorry, I should have probably told you that a little while ago. Like a half an hour ago, Dana, that would have been pretty helpful. I know. Introduces a suite of radionuclides, 90 strontium, it's a bone seeker, 99 technetium, 129 iodine, 134 cesium, 137 cesium to the Arctic Ocean. Calculations indicate global fallout, carried runoff plus discharges from Russia's reprocessing facilities contributed 237 Neptunian to the upper Arctic Ocean in about equal proportions, but the combined total is less than half of that from Sellafield. France has taken fuel from many countries on top of that, Japan for instance, and shipping the fuel back plus the remainers. But France is also shipping nuclear waste to northern Russia. Fallout from Chernobyl added insignificant amount of 237 Neptunian and iodine 129 to the Arctic Ocean compared to discharges from Sellafield and La Hague. Right, because it was a big plume, there was a meltdown. But La Hague and Sellafield, they're unmitigated all day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for over 6 decades, I guess is what they're... Right, there was a significant dose, though. But when you try to compare it to Sellafield and La Hague, it's considered insignificant. Even though it's not insignificant. But compared to Sellafield and La Hague, right? If Sellafield and La Hague didn't exist, it would be incredibly terrible. But because they exist, it's like, there's nothing compared to these crazies. Threats to the Arctic ecosystem. The Soviet Union, Russia has 18,000 dumps up there in the ocean. This is one of my favorite stories. Everybody knows this. That's around here any times. The sunken nuclear submarine Comsomolets and its effects on the environment. It is found that neither the submarine hull nor the reactor vessel that's being bombarded by neutrons for decades will be destroyed by corrosion for at least 1,000 years. Imagine how batshit these people are. Claiming that metal, like in 500 years, there'll be no trace of the submarine. It'll be just a fuel sitting there, if that's how it works. Because the ocean keeps it cool, I suppose, right? But it has to degrade. So, because the salt, claiming that salt is not corrosive at the bottom of the ocean, this is absurdness. But this is how crazy the industry actually is. It does stuff like this. It's an actual study saying that all the other subs will disintegrate, but not the nuclear sub. No, that'll be okay, Dana. But then later they talk about the total radionuclide inventory presently is estimated at 8 petabecquerels, but only 1 terabecquerel, which is a trillion atoms, is released annually into the surrounding environment. Well, how can you have it coming that much going, which is not a lot when you actually do the numbers, but it is a lot when you think about the harm it can cause. It's the whole story is insane. In short, the study does not pretend to be completely answer all the environmental questions relating to the sunken submarine. Clearly indicates that the submarine represents no significant threat to man today or in the future for at least 1,000 years. So these people obviously should be arrested and burnt at the stake. Really, right? They should be arrested and then found guilty of crimes against humanity. But, burn them at the stake. We got to go back to burning these figures at the stake. We need some kind of deterrence for this kind of evilness. By the way, it's not illegal to murder you with radiation in the nuclear industry because Congress and parliaments don't have the authority, or the EU, to make it illegal to poison you. This is why the EU passed it, because it's not a crime to poison you, see? Only the non-regulatory committees have that distinction. Your Congress and Parliament don't have the authority. Put that in your pipe and smoke good. Oh, you hippies. Bless your hearts. That's what I'm going to be when I grow up, a hippie. Oh, cold water, good. I'm just wondering, should I try juices? But ooh, here we go. Yay. Ocean floor favored for nuclear waste dumping. French to dump their nuclear waste. They did for decades into the ocean, right? In the repositories in the Atlantic Ocean. Calling the Atlantic Ocean a repository. What France done to the French Polynesians with all their nuclear testing, does that even count in how evil nuclear actually is? The radioactive fallout from the Sahara Desert alone is stunning. French nuclear companies are dumping radioactive waste in Siberia. Orano, right, which, because Areva, which was the French government, didn't want to take care of their obligations for 1 billion years, so they went bankrupt and started up Orano 2 days before they went bankrupt. New satellite images shows thousands of barrels lying outdoors exposed to the element from France. The key principle of taxonomy, the EU taxonomy, that was ignored because it's not illegal to poison you with radiation, is that any activity must do no significant harm to the environment in order to be included in the sustainability. Well, no, all you needed was a bunch of corrupt MEPs, and they had enough to win the vote. They didn't care if they won by 1 vote as long as they won. No science allowed. Everybody should ban everything from the EU. Nuclear dumping on the high seas. When you look at the history of nuclear, how can you consider it as a source for anything but misery? The Atlantic Trench, serious nuclear pollution problem. The Atlantic Trench, that's a whole bunch of dumps that are identified. But remember, United Kingdom just drove along throwing nuclear waste overboard like it was a big party for 3 decades. It's estimated more than 112,000 tons of nuclear waste. Remember that for later, by the way. 112,000 tons. 112. Let's do the math on that for pounds. 112,000 tons. Ooh. Times 2,000. So that's 224 million pounds. I'm going to leave that there because we need that later. 224 million pounds. Nuclear waste was released into the sea periodically between 1949 and 82 by Belgium, France, United Kingdom, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, Sweden, Switzerland. These nuclear wastes are found at depths of 4,000 meters. I'll bring up the calculator for that one. I gotta go. I hate math. Okay, that's a lie. So 4,000 meters times 3 feet is 12,000 feet. Divide that by 33 feet to get atmospheres. There's 363 atmospheres, and each atmosphere is around 14.56 pounds per square inch. Means there's 5,300 pounds per square inch. There's an automobile tipped up on the edge of its bumper on every inch of those containers at 4,000 feet. They would have imploded before they got to 4,000 feet. And we wonder why the industry, why all the fish are dying. Fukushima was the catalyst to drive it to the dark edge, right? 5,300 pounds. 6 nuclear submarines whose recovery has been impossible. High concentrations were discovered of plutonium in 1992, leaking drums with 5,300 pounds per square inch on them. Gee, I don't know, I can't imagine how that could happen. Drums are strong. Like those submarines don't corrode for 1,000 years, Dana. Now, as the Soviet Union collapsed, which, you know, the Soviet Union collapse meant that everybody's pension was gone. Oh, and all the patents are gone. So imagine your country, your government, rather than getting out of the way, says, well, I can't fix it, so sorry, no pensions, no patents for anybody. We're going to dissolve the country. Literally, it's absurd. It turns out a vast amount of highly radioactive waste was dumped by the Soviet Union, twice the combined total of 12 other nuclear nations. And I find that hard to believe because Britain was brutal. The threat to the marine life is unclear since no records are available. No one knows for sure if containment vessels are intact or leaking. Do you really think they had containment vessels back then? Is there anybody actually that gullible on the planet? It could be, didn't it? This will teach you about how evil this industry actually is right here. A report from the Soviet Union dumped 2.5 million curries of radioactive waste, including 18 nuclear reactors from submarines and an icebreaker. So nuclear reactors, a couple of 100 tons each, and a big dose by any standard to 2.5 million curries is almost exactly twice what was previously thought to have been dumped into the sea during the whole of the nuclear era. So what is a curry? A curry is 37 billion atoms pulsing every second, forever. So in a gram, the strontium-90 would have about 140 curries. Cesium-137 would have 88, almost 90 curries per gram. So if you average it at 120 curies per gram, just talking about these particular isotopes only, not talking about, because curium isotopes, which needs lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for plutonium, is not in this equation. And it's the biggest byproduct of the radiated fuel rods. But let's just talk about strontium-90 at 120 curies. 120 times 37 million atomic decays per second. Dumped all over the ocean. Is 44 pounds. See, you get 2.5 million times 100, or divided by 120, was 20,833 grams. Divide the grams by 29 to get the ounces, is 718. Divide the 718 by 16 ounces to get the poundage, which is 44 pounds. That's 44 pounds. So 44 pounds is considered 18 nuclear reactors and submarines and icebreakers, reactor cores, and double what was dumped by all nations during the whole of the nuclear era. See, which is what the IAEA claims. So you see, these are perpetual liars. Obviously, the numbers are incredibly, significantly worse than that. Obviously, it's more than 44 pounds dumped into the ocean. I'm pretty sure one of these weighs 44 pounds or more. And that one there probably weighs 44 pounds. These are dump sites, where they just went and dumped it straight down. But the United Kingdom had done it for 30 years. And I guarantee you, they never went to the same place for 30 years. In fact, the records show they were just driving around, dumping it as they're driving as quick as they could. So 2.5 million curies, claiming it's almost exactly twice what was previously been dumped at sea during the whole of the nuclear era, is disgusting betrayal, right? That's a disgusting betrayal. So 16 power plants cast into the shallow waters of the Kura Sea, 6 of them heavy with radioactive fuel. Heavy with radioactive fuel. So it's 44 pounds heavier than 6 reactors. 2 of the 18 reactors went into the Sea of Japan. Russia's Navy still dumping minor amounts, so is every other country, with disgusting disease factories known as nuclear power plants. The International Atomic Energy Agency has estimated a dozen nuclear nations from 1946 to 1982 dumped a total of 1.24 million curies of radioactive refuge into the world's ocean. 1.24 million curies is equal to 10,000 grams. 10,333 grams is equal to 356 ounces, is equal to 22 pounds. Do you think any of these drums there weigh 22 pounds? Because they probably dumped 4 or 5 million of them alone. But then the International Atomic Energy Agency wouldn't lie. They're a big... The universities would call them out, Dana. How many times have I heard that over the years? Now, you know, people are not gullible. They're just stupid. And being stupid is not helpful. And it's not their fault. It's the nuclear... I should say, I shouldn't use the word stupid, I suppose. Are ignorant. But academically, but not as a person, hopefully. And everywhere they got mining, they contaminate all the water in all these communities. Everything eventually washes down to the ocean. They don't get hung up somewhere. So all these dumps had a total of 22 pounds, Dana. They dumped 3 grams here and 6 grams there and 2 grams there, Dana. And oh yeah, 22 pounds. So 37 billion. So it's still a bad number. I'll do the math for you because it's just like, what? Anyway, hopefully people will understand. As soon as I hack my throat off, hang on. Okay, that seems to be a little bit almost better. Okay, not really. So 500 days, less than 2 years of ingestion of 10 becquerels per day in your diet, where your food is at 100 becquerels a kilogram. Total body activity of 1,400 becquerels of man-made anthropogenic, of just that single isotope that they're utilizing. But when they say there's 10 becquerels per day, it's because they're almost maybe sometimes looking for it, and they're calling it gamma. And they're only acknowledging cesium. They're not acknowledging all the other gamma emitters. And you can't exclude all the other emitters like alpha, betas, and neutrons because they can't have one without all the others. And the problem with all of this is they all play at their own frequency, but they're all almost at the speed of light. And so they emit pulses of energy in every direction, gammas, alphas, neutrons, betas. Every second are pulsing energy at the speed of light. They hit each other and they change direction because they can't mesh their different energy frequencies almost at the speed of light, folks. They do this every second. And so when you got all this going on in your body, that's X-rays, and that's annihilating your DNA, your chromosome, the sperms of the insects and animals, and mammals, and everything else. Right, because and then it bioaccumulates way up. When you get up to large fish, it's 1 million times bioaccumulation. So when you see predatory birds dying and nobody knows why, you have to conceive the nuclear through the bio, right? So this bomb alone, this was the plutonium fatboy, I think, is it? Don't quote me, but one of those bombs at that era is not. If not, this one's either the Hiroshima uranium bomb or the Nagasaki plutonium bomb. Had around 20 kilograms of plutonium. So there was the Soviet Union detonated their biggest bomb that we know about was 50 kilotons, was it? It was equal to 3,008, and it was a hydrogen bomb, equal to 3,800 Hiroshima bombs, Nagasaki-sized bombs, because that's Hiroshima, Nagasaki there. It was equal to 3,800 of these going off at one time with the same, so you got to scale up the radioactive fallout from something like that, right? So is there 22 pounds in one of these barrels, I wonder? How about that barrel there? You think that might have 22 pounds? That's a nuclear barrel on the ocean floor. Do you think, in shallow water, that one, by the way, do you think that might have 22 pounds in it, Dana? Yeah, maybe. That's just getting uranium out of the ground. That's a chemical pond. They have thousands of them. They evaporate into your environment and destroy endless life. Do you think there's 22 pounds here somewhere of all this nuclear waste? Just dumping it, burying it, and walking away pretending it didn't happen. They can't get near it on top of that, see? He's way too close. He's probably fired that day, same as this guy. These little suits can't protect you. Those gloves can't protect you from gamma, shines, X-rays, neutron bursts. These barrels can't protect the employees, and they break down really quick in damp, cold, wet soil. You know, if you look at the study from 2019, they talk about the contamination of the Bikini Atolls, where it extends over 1 million square kilometers. Do you think that was 22 pounds, Dana? In fact, Castle Bravo, one of the Castle Bravo, I think it was the one called, because Castle had a number of large hydrogen bombs. Castle Bravo was equal to 1,000 Hiroshima bombs going off at the same time. And so the radioactive fallout is real. This is absurd amounts we're talking about. But the International Atomic Energy Agency is claiming only 22 pounds went into the ocean in a 40-year period from all the world's dumping. If that doesn't make you sick to your guts and make you rethink your place on this planet, like, that's, why are we trying to kill the ocean? Why are they trying to kill the ocean for? It's a question I have a lot. Because that's what's happened probably more so. Particularly the Pacific, with the research expeditions we've done out there, clearly that ocean has died. Radioactive cleanup at Idaho nuclear site is working. Adriva Bay, left over from the Soviets. This is the stuff horror shows should be made of. This makes Chernobyl look like a cakewalk. And Chernobyl, there's 3 million children with disabilities because of Chernobyl. They closed 9,000 farms in Ireland, Scotland, United Kingdom. To claim nuclear has no adverse quantities to it is absurd. It's always hemorrhaging from the fuel pools. Every fuel pool is hemorrhaging. I mean, what they done here, they just left the fuel pools outdoors, fuel pools, for decades, splitting the atom into the environment from submarine fuel exchanges. Origins of age, ongoing radioactive contamination of soil near La Hague reprocessing plant of the soil. So imagine, like, when you see all these farms surrounded surrounding a nuclear power plant, the farms were there first. So the nuclear industry does this because you can ship the radiation away by harvesting the food, right? It's always falling out in these places. It's absolute unequivocally an emergency, and the industry is taking over key positions, and so looking at the EU tells you that for sure. Another study, stillbirths among offsprings of male radiation workers at Sellafield. Stillbirths among workers at a refueling processing facility right next door to a nuclear meltdown that started in 1957. Hemorrhaging 8 million liters a day into the Atlantic Ocean. So when you see numbers like that, and how can you expect the farms not to be contaminated that are surrounding the majority of nuclear power plants? How does that actually work? Child cancers around nuclear fuel reprocessing plant at Sellafield. Same thing with New York, with inactive. They used to have a nuclear fuel reprocessing facility in western New York. So you had Indian Point, you had how many millions of fish did they kill a year? I forget. Several 9 billion in one, 7 billion in another. Adult fish. Baby fish were exterminated by the trillions each year at the Jersey plant and the Indian Point, each and every year. The same with all nuclear power plants, right? Because they're boiling a million gallons a minute, 4,500 tons of water a minute, 4,500 pickup trucks of water a minute. Distributions. Oh yeah, so the most powerful nuclear detonation ever carried out by the Americans, Castle Bravo. That's that bomb there. Released large quantities of radioactive debris into the atmosphere, fell over 7,000 square miles. It was equal to over 1,000 Hiroshima bombs going off at the one time, was the Castle Bravo. Russia's biggest bomb hit the plane 75 miles away. The mushroom cloud 42 miles in the air, 7 times higher than Everest. Visible from 620 miles away. People in Norway, Finland felt the blast and had shattered glass. That was equal to 3,800 Hiroshima Nagasaki-sized weapons going off. And what's really strange about that story, so the American bombs I would have that little clip where it says equal to 1,000 Hiroshima. That's actually missing from this lot for some reason. And then this one, the Tesa bomb was supposed to be 3,800 Hiroshima-sized bombs. That's missing from my file. Wow. Naughty bastards. 350 nuclear bombs and ongoing suffering. The shameful history of nuclear testing in Australia and the Pacific. They destroyed all the atolls, right? The Bikini Atolls, the French Polynesians, the Christmas Island atolls. Savages, all these beautiful, wonderful paradises. They radiated them to hell and destroyed them. Actually atomized some of them. The secondary sex ratio in Italy over the past 80 years, because of nuclear testing, changes the sex ratio of males to females, more males than females. It's going to be true for all species. The Custom disaster. The Mayak had quite a and they used to dump it directly into the Tetra River. And they evacuated around 7,500 little tiny communities. But there's still, don't quote me, around 1,000, or is it 400? I can't remember. Left on. That's a huge, long. It runs in all kinds of estuaries and everything else. Smoke was released into the air with no regard to its content. They had no containment on these reactors. So it was hemorrhaging. It was splitting the atom directly into the environment. Actual demons, eh? They decided to put nuclear waste in a big tank, like a big fuel pool, except it was a tank. It blew up because of the hydrogen, because of the meltdown inside. It caused hydrogen gases and it detonated. And they lost another 20,000 square kilometers. And out of 270,000 people living in the nuclear wasteland, only 11,000 were evacuated. That took 2 years. Within a few days, 300 of the village's 500 residences died of radiation poisoning. Chalk River, Canada, they're burying that meltdown on site because they can't clean it up. Look the British nuclear veterans in the eye, Prime Minister, and tell them they're imagining the cancers, the heart problems, liver problems, the respiratory, the pituitary, the thyroid, the adrenaline. all the illnesses and diseases. There's 1,800 illnesses and diseases, autoimmune deficiencies and injuries. That's Sellafield surrounded by farms. Why are these people so evil is the big question I think everybody should start asking. Sellafield was all contaminated, the milk, the chicken, the golf course. Sellafield, Britain's worst nuclear... They refuse to call it a meltdown, eh? No one was evacuated. No iodine pills were distributed. Work went on and most people were not even told about the nuclear meltdown. And then the Rocky Flat, the FBI had to go in and physically close it down. Rocky Flats, right? We don't really talk about it as much as we used to, but Rocky Flats, what they done there, they also made the plutonium triggers for nuclear weapons. The amount of contamination there was extraordinary. And Idaho, and all of these were built in Idaho National Laboratories, Los Alamos. All of these places, by the way, are built on the biggest freshwater aqueducts in that part of the continent. Right smack on top of it. All those aqueducts were incredibly contaminated. You could never clean it up from nuclear, but they got billions to try, and they're not trying, they're just going to steal it because you can't clean up an aquifer. If you think of Santa Susana, 460 times more radiation than 3 Mile Island. Hanford, they expect Hanford to cost up to 700 billion more at least. At worst, well, it's 585 square miles. They don't really tell you what's going on there. They got 41 miles of unlined trenches. They dumped, I can't remember, there's an extraordinary billions of gallons directly into the soil of just liquid radioactive waste. Gets into the Columbia River. Russia's Arctic nuclear dump may become promising fishing ground. 17,000 containers with radioactive waste. 16 nuclear reactors dumped. 6 of them with spent uranium fuel still on board. It's all kept secret. We already covered this one earlier. Claiming the nuclear submarine won't breach for at least 1,000 years. Congenital heart disease after Fukushima 2019 study showed 14.2% per 100,000 births, which is 14,200 children for every 100,000 born need open heart surgery because of Fukushima. Almost 1 million extra cancers by 2012. And cancer is just one of 1,800 illnesses and diseases and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries. The Feds fear an electronic an EMP meltdown. If you have an EMP from the sun hit Earth, all the reactors melt down at one time, and the fuel pools. Now, mortality among U.S. military participants at 8 above ground nuclear weapon test series. Liquid, so San Onofre still dumping radioactive waste out in pipes out into the ocean. Belgium, between 1960 and 82, threw its nuclear waste, 30,000 tons of it, into the North Atlantic. But the IAEA says, Dana, it's only 22 pounds. From all countries, Dana. Yeah, I know, isn't that something? Coalition wants another $7.25 billion for Department of Energy nuclear cleanup at just a single site. Jacobs wins $4.6 billion for U.S. nuclear cleanup. Unrestricted use of Donneray in 300 years. Man, I can't wait to go and have a picnic there. That'll be something. 300 years, not a long wait, is it? Homeless migrant workers exploited to clean up Fukushima, not EU. If the EU had to go there, parliamentary who voted today that nuclear is green had to go to Fukushima and help clean it up for a day, they would have got no votes, right? Zero, zilch, not a one. It's hard to believe it, but in the poll tonight, I'm telling you, Dana, is the dirty disease factories, nuclear power plants, also known as atomic plague, a green energy? Bizarrely, 13% said yes out of 38 votes. Because they're spamming me, but there's not very many of them, right? 87% though said yeah. Yeah, it's a disease factory, baby. It's not green. Downwinders impacted by nuclear testing, which is almost the whole planet, right? If you work at a Hanford for 8-hour shift, you can get a pension, even if you don't get sick for 30 years. And Luxembourg had that law too, right? That you can sue a nuclear plant 30 years after an accident if you get sick. 1986, a submarine, Russian submarine with 27 nuclear missiles sank. Did either one of them weigh 22 pounds, I wonder? The Soviet Union detonated a nuclear bomb to put out a burning gas well. Tells you how crazy these people actually are. The Westinghouse Waltz Mill test reactor meltdowns. Like, there's so much that people forget, resulting in the disposition of 2 million gallons of contaminated water generated during the accident. They probably boiled that off like they'd done at 3 Mile Island, right? In increments over a couple of years. Because it's so deadly, you can't pick up 5 gallons of it without dying right away. You can't put it in the back of a truck, drive down the road, because you're wrecking everybody on the highway. Atomic history of Christmas Island. A tiny island where humanity realized its most lethal potential. A tiny island where Britain took great pleasure in destroying every facet of it. It's disgusting what they done to Christmas Island and the victims. The babies, they call the babies down there, the women do jelly babies. The jelly babies. After Fukushima, you can see where Twitter sold all the tweets with Fukushima in it to universities so they can track down who were the influencers. They tracked it down to the top 100 influencers, and then they censored them, got rid of them. Patient-to-patient variability in expressions of radiation-induced normal tissue injury. Radiotherapy is associated with a broad spectrum of early and late normal tissue injuries. This study here it basically said you better not take in any radiation therapy at all. That 3% efficiency chemotherapy patients on cancer cure. This study was repeated in 2004. It showed a 5-year survival in adults with an estimated to be 2.3% in Australia, 2.1% in the USA. And the conclusion to justify the continued funding and availability of drugs used in chemotherapy is absurd. It says it's better not to get nothing than it is to go that route. You got better chances of winning in Las Vegas than you do with chemotherapy. Chemotherapy unequivocally should be illegal. This is what I mean. Like, every facet of the nuclear industry is insane. It's actually insane. They actually got americium-241 in smoke detectors in half or more of the planet's smoke detectors. So when you add it up, it's a lot of nuclear waste you just got rid of, see? Rather than storing it for 250 million years, they put it in your smoke detectors and hope you give it to the dump where they burn it and release it into the environment. Because that's what they like. They want it released into the environment. It's like I call it a death cult because I don't know what else to call it. Introduction of radiation injuries, another silent epidemic. Radiation, so think about the rest of this here is that you go to the doctor says you got cancer. Oh, doctor, there must be something you can do. Well, no, sorry, not what you can do. Please, doctor, you got to do something. That's my only child. That's my wife. Please, doctor, I'm young, blah, blah, blah. Doctor says, well, there's chemotherapy. Yeah. Sign the dotted line so you can't sue us later. And here's what radiation induced into humans and animals have been doing. They know this. They get a kick out of it, and a lot of money too. Radiation-induced injuries to the eyes. So when they were treated for their sinuses, the radiation wrecked the eyes of the victims. In 24 to 49 patients that were treated, almost half of them had their eyesight screwed up because they done radiation on their nose. Language decline after brain radiation therapy. Brain radiation therapy. You can't call it radiation therapy. I'm sorry, but it's absurd. It's absurd. See, if it was illegal to poison you with radiation, they couldn't do this to you. Congress and Parliament doesn't have the authority to make it illegal to do that on top of that. Imagine that. Try wrapping your mind around that. Your government doesn't have the authority to make it illegal, but they're certainly willing to pay for it. Recurrent brain tumors from radiation injury. Recurrent brain tumors from being treated with radiation. Typically, you're just going to end up with a whole bunch of tumors until you're dead. Radiation injury to the heart. Especially in patients treated with radiation for the age of 21. That's reassuring. Cardiac injuries following treatment for breast cancer. Can't radiate the breast without radiating the heart and everything else. Radiation-induced rectal injuries. Oh, joy. Radiation-induced brain necrosis. Spinal cord recovery from radiation injuries. Patients with radiation-induced bowel injuries. I can think of somebody I'd like to get rectal radiation injuries to, but it's not illegal apparently. Radiation injuries to the central nervous system. Radiation-induced liver disease. Radiation-induced bile duct injuries. Radiation-induced cardiac injuries after breast cancer. Radiation-induced kidney injuries. Hypoxia because of radiation-induced lung injuries. Blood spinal cord barrier disruption. Central nervous system radiation injuries. Radiation-induced lung injuries. Radiation-induced bowel injuries. Laser treatments of severe radiation injured lower intestinal tracts. Radiation-induced kidney injuries. Breast radiation injury litigations. Central nervous system radiation injuries. Injuries to the cranial nerves. Radiation injuries to the head and the neck. The assessment of radiation-induced brain injuries. Small bowel radiation injuries. Radiation-induced intestine syndromes. By the way, vitamin C uptake may save lives after a radiation accident. So vitamin C, increasing your vitamin C can help you after a radiation event. That's a really interesting one, isn't it? Acute injury of the salivary glands during radiation therapy. Radiation-induced bile duct injuries. Brain radiation injuries. Radiation-induced brain injuries. Right there, look at it. Radiation-induced brain injuries. All different studies. Look at all these studies trying to warn you. All of these studies, and going to call it therapy. Absurd, isn't it? Radiation tumor progression from radiation injury after cranial irradiation. Ionizing radiation-induced brain injuries. Radiation-induced brain injury. Radiation-induced normal brain injuries. Test battery for the assessment of radiation-induced brain injury. Mitigate radiation-induced brain necrosis, an experimental study. Microwave-induced brain injuries. Injuries to the brain from radiation therapy with the whole brain. Brain radionecrosis after adjuvant radiation therapy. Cognitive impairment in young patients treated with radiation therapy for a brain tumor caused by radiation. Aging mass detections. Radiation-induced brain injuries. Radiation-induced soft tissue injury to the head and neck. Late radiation rectal injury. Surgical treatment of chest wall radiation-induced injuries. Radiation injuries to the nervous system. Skin necrosis. Radiation injury to the canine spinal cords. They kill lots of dogs and puppies to figure that out. Radiation-induced death. Always. Acute radiation injuries. Radiation-induced lung injuries. Late radiation injuries after post-operative radiotherapy of breast cancer patients. Shows up next year or the year after. Radiation-induced spinal cord injuries. Radiation injuries to the growth plate. Induced lung injuries. Pulmonary injuries. Intestinal injuries. Radiation therapy-induced cardiac injuries. Nervous system. That went up today. Lower digestive tracts. Optic nerves. Human kidneys. Cognitive impairments. Radiation bone injuries. Radiation injury to the nervous system. If you can think it up, I got a study on it, how it's going to kill you. Colon and rectum, surgical treatments of radiation injuries of the rectum. Just more assaults on your body, more assaults on your body. Microwave radiation injuries. Summary of symposium on acute radiation-induced injuries. Radiation-induced skin wounds. Late radiation-induced rectal injuries after treatment of the uterus. Real encouraging, isn't it? They do this all day, all over the world, and trying to bring it into other countries to kill them off. Several decades after radiation therapy, your arteries are hardened up from being bombarded with neutrons. Radiation-associated cancer risk among injured children treated at different trauma centers. Impaired wound healing after radiation therapy. I think you get the hint at this stage, do you? Ooh. That's not bad. Well, what I'm showing you is just all the way that the nuclear industry is attacking us, even in our hospitals. Instead of giving you an option, do you want chemotherapy or DCA or vitamin C? How many people do you think is going to choose chemo? Nobody. How many doctors you think are going to push chemo? Probably nobody. If they were allowed to have an option. But they're not. So if you're watching my video and it's freezing on you, try lowering the quality of the video. It might be too high quality for your bandwidth. And if you lower the quality, at the bottom of my video, you see like a little cog, a wheel, like a little wheel. If you click on that, you can change the resolution, because the natural resolution of your phone might be high, and if you drop it down a bit, it might not. You might, because if your video is too high for your bandwidth, the video will freeze, right? They screw me over sometimes, so it's not just... Well, if you're new to this conversation, for instance, and this is your first show, you picked a good one. You picked a good one. I'll kick ass tonight. We're not going to get to the stories because the intro took too long. Such is the way in the world of nuclear. Let me fix this. There we go. Bum, 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 bum. Let's see if I get this for you. So currently you're watching this video. And so that's, hi everybody. How's everybody doing? If you scroll down underneath my video, and after the video you can open up the dialog box and get to all those. If you go all the way to the bottom, there's two ways you can donate directly to me at this link right here at PayPal. That's directly to me, Dan Durnford, and the nuclearproctologist.org. And if you go to the nuclearproctologist.org, just wait for the page to load up. And right below the first picture, you'll see a donate button. That'll take most cards that you can put into it. So just about any card that you put in there, I got you covered. I'll show you what I mean here. You go all the way down. You can see you can pay through all of these cards right here. You can donate at my site with any of these cards, as far as I know. Just by clicking on that dialogue, right? That one right here. And once you put your email in, oops, that doesn't matter. Once you put your email in there, you can donate. Hi everybody, hope everybody's doing good. Yeah. Thank you, Angels, please. So we got 45 votes. Is the dirty disease factories, known as nuclear power plants, also known as the atomic plague or green energy? 87% defeated the trolls, who said 13%. They're admitting that as dirty disease factories, and that's the atomic plague, but calling it a green energy. You see what I got done there? So if you vote that it's green energy, you also acknowledge that it's a disease factory. For those who don't know, you can just watch the video. You'll see it's the worst thing in human history. The worst thing on the planet Earth is a nuclear power plant. And its byproducts are still splitting the atoms for millions of years, poisoning the biosphere forever. These are extermination machines. That's all they simply are. We wanted to put knobby tires on the bike, for instance, right? So we need 2 tires, off-road tires. But we also need to fix the boat, which is around 400. But we also got to do blah, 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 right? So we got to try to raise money and apologize for trying to make this operation work. Because this is all I do. And I'm at kind of a standstill. We got all this stuff that needs to be fixed or repaired. We got some stuff coming in. There's always stuff breaking down, but we deal with what we can when we can, right? So I'm just trying to keep any momentum. And I'm out there fighting for the planet. We want to get out, start. I was thinking about taking off tomorrow, not for overnighters, but for day runs to get out into the forest, look for insects, and particularly spiders and birds in the ponds and stuff like that. And so we're going to have to make an attempt at it the way we can. Summer doesn't last very long on the East Coast, right? And missing the research, the ability to go do research expeditions is catastrophic. It's a catastrophic event on its own. So previous research expeditions from British Columbia to Alaska showed an extinction event in the Pacific Ocean. Over 6 years, the species are completely missing. We went back year after year. This are pictures from it. You'll never take the pictures till you left again. Radioactive fallout, carbon-free radioactive fallout wiped out the entire Pacific coastlines. Not just Canada's coastline, because the ocean doesn't work that way, right? So we wiped out all of these species, and we're seeing the same thing on the East Coast. We want to get out because radioactive fallout doesn't respect borders. You'll never take the pictures till you left again because of Fukushima. If that doesn't terrify you, what will? This is why nuclear is such a terrible, bad idea. This is a terrible idea. Nuclear, the endless disease factory. This is what an average day actually looks like. Getting the shit beat out of you, frozen, soaking wet, all by yourself, no contact with people. And then when you get into port, you gotta hope somebody donated so you can get fuel and get the fuck back out there.
Anyway, up there, I forgot to clean all my windows today.
That was last year, and We found 5 dead birds on the other side of those islands.
Will let you
One of them had half his head was a
have no
tumor.
problem navigating.
The other half was normal.
Navigating it.
The other half one great big tumor. There's no way to tell it was a bird. 5 dead birds in about 2 hours. I took that on the west coast of Vancouver Island on one of those research expeditions. Like in real life, it was just incredibly loud. And I guess that's it for tonight, though. But we'll close the poll at 46 votes. 87% of the people said no. Nuclear is not a green energy. It's absurd to suggest that it is. It's just it's a public relation thing, right? Canada lifted restrictions on food from a nuclear wasteland after 93 days. It was actually banned in 14 prefectures by 55 countries for over a decade. Canada lifted all restrictions after 93 days and just poisoned everybody in Canada. EU didn't do that because they knew nuclear wasn't clean, see? They waited 10 years before they let food, when the nuclear industry got in charge. The current lot, by the way, are the same people that lifted the restrictions in the EU in September last year. We should all be humiliated that nuclear even exists. We should all hang our heads in shame that nuclear is allowed to exist. Yeah, we have pictures of the mutated birds. That's right. I'm not going to try to find them right now, but we showed all of that after the expedition. That's it tonight. Good night, everybody. Have a great night. Great day tomorrow. Hopefully it makes it back for another show tomorrow night. This was kind of a hard show tonight, so it is what it is. This is Wednesday, so tomorrow's Thursday. It's hard to imagine I won't be back tomorrow night, but you never know. Tomorrow's usually the last show of the week because I start on Sundays. So Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I used to do it 7 days a week. If I wasn't on the ocean on research expedition, 7 days a week. I decided to give people a break because after years and years and years of doing it, and that was a mistake. I should have never slowed down. Because it's so hard to keep that momentum, right? Have a great night. We'll see everybody. I'm just kidding you. We'll see everybody on the show tomorrow night. God bless everybody. Hugs for everybody. Have a great day tomorrow. And if you can donate a few dollars, the 2 links are at the bottom of my description. Costs as little and goes a long way for a really good cause that can't exist without you. So if you don't have a way to do it, find a friend that does and give them the money and get them to donate. Everything is secured. We'll see everybody. Have a great day, folks. Take care.